"You're a burden, Mom." Those 4 words landed on the Thanksgiving table more heavily than the 20-pound turkey sitting in the center of it. For a moment nobody moved. Nobody reached for the mashed potatoes. Nobody lifted a fork. The laughter that had filled the dining room only seconds earlier seemed to vanish into the walls. I looked at my son Mark, wondering if I had heard him correctly. At 68 years old, I had lived through heartbreak, loss, and disappointment. I had buried my husband 12 years ago. I had worked double shifts when Mark was young. I had sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and countless comforts to make sure he had opportunities one never did. Yet there he sat across from me, wearing a pressed navy sweater and a confident smile, as if he had merely commented on the weather. Beside him, his wife Jessica lowered her eyes toward her wine glass. She didn't defend me. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked relieved that the words had finally been spoken aloud. I forced myself to take a slow breath. The warm glow from the dining room chandelier reflected off the crystal glasses and polished silverware. Outside, the late November sky was fading into darkness. Inside, the room felt strangely cold. My granddaughter Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair. My grandson Ethan stared down at his plate. Nobody wanted to be the first person to speak. "A burden?" I finally asked quietly. Mark leaned back. "I didn't mean it in a bad way," he said. "I'm just saying things are different now. We all have responsibilities. Different now." Those words echoed in my mind. For months I had noticed small changes. Phone calls that ended quickly. Family plans I learned about after they happened. Conversations that stopped when I entered a room. At first I told myself I was imagining things. Families change. Children grow up. Life moves forward. But sitting there at that Thanksgiving table, watching everyone avoid my eyes, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Suspicion. A quiet, uncomfortable suspicion. Jessica finally smiled and reached for the gravy boat. "Let's not make today uncomfortable," she said lightly. "It's Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. A holiday meant for gratitude. A day for family. A day for remembering what truly matters." I looked around the room. The expensive dining set. The renovations. The vacations they posted online every summer. The comfortable life everyone seemed to enjoy. Then I thought about something I had never questioned before. Something so obvious that I suddenly wondered how I had missed it for so long. And as the conversation awkwardly moved on around me, I made a decision. I would find out exactly why my own son believed I was a burden. Because deep down, I was beginning to suspect that nobody at that table remembered who had been carrying the weight all along. After the initial shock settled, I quietly excused myself from the table under the pretense of checking on the pumpkin pie in the oven. The kitchen was dimly lit with soft amber light spilling from the overhead fixture, casting long shadows across the counter. I ran my fingers along the marble countertop, tracing the smooth surface as if searching for a memory embedded in it. The house was unusually silent. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock filled the air, punctuating each second with deliberate precision. I remembered the countless Thanksgiving dinners I had prepared over the years, each one crafted with care and attention. The aroma of roasted turkey and fresh herbs wafting through the rooms, welcoming family and friends alike. Each dish had been a labor of love, each decoration a small testament to the thought I put into making these holidays special. Now the laughter and chatter were replaced by avoidance and quiet whispers. My mind wandered back to the stacks of receipts and bills I had carefully organized, the invoices for every grocery store, every floral arrangement, every handcrafted detail that marked the celebrations I had funded. I recalled seeing Mark and Jessica glance at the invoices, their expressions carefully masked, yet their eyes betraying the casual disregard for what I had done. The thought weighed on me quietly, building a slow, simmering resolve. I poured a cup of tea, steam curling gently into the warm air, and held it in my hands. I let my eyes wander across the kitchen, noticing the fine china stored above the sink, the silver serving spoons polished to a reflective sheen. Each item, each memory was a marker of my patience, of my willingness to support and nurture. Yet patience had limits, and silence had a way of speaking louder than words. I realized in that moment that the quiet compliance I had shown for years was being mistaken for weakness. The soft glow of the lamp highlighted the fine lines etched into my face, each one a testament to the decades of careful attention and sacrifice. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the warmth seep into my chest, grounding me. It was in this quiet, in the stillness of the kitchen, that the first tendrils of determination began to form. I would not allow the invisibility that had crept into my family to define me. The day had started with words meant to wound, but in the quiet reflection, I found the clarity to see the full picture. I could feel the shift in my perspective, the calm gathering before a storm, and I knew that understanding this imbalance was the first step toward reclaiming my place, not through confrontation or anger, but through measured, deliberate action that spoke louder than any argument could. Every detail, every memory, every small evidence of my contribution was now a tool in a quiet strategy of reclamation and justice. I moved toward the living room, careful not to let my presence disrupt the fragile conversation happening across the table. The sunlight filtering through the half-drawn curtains caught the dust motes in the air, painting them like tiny golden specks suspended in quiet tension. I sat in the corner, my hands folded over my lap, observing each movement. Mark reached for the cranberry sauce, his fingers brushing Jessica's, but she did not flinch. She smiled politely, but her eyes darted away, betraying a subtle anxiety. I noticed the slight tremor in Emily's hand as she clutched her napkin, and Ethan's frown deepened as he carefully avoided looking at me. The room felt heavier with each passing second, the ambient sounds of silverware, and the low hum of the refrigerator emphasizing the silence in between words. I recalled the subtle patterns of the past months, the missed calls, the unexplained trips, the careful selection of who saw what and who did not. It became increasingly clear that these were not accidents. There was intention in every omission. The realization settled in like the weight of a winter sky. I sipped the now lukewarm tea, letting it anchor my thoughts, letting the warmth contrast the cool calculation forming in my mind. The chandelier cast a gentle halo around the table, accentuating each expression, each glance, each hesitation. I watched Jessica adjust her sleeve, her posture tense, and Mark shift in his chair, attempting to appear casual but failing to mask the underlying discomfort. I noted every gesture, committing it to memory, understanding that even small details could reveal truths hidden beneath a surface of polite smiles and restrained conversation. I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection, tracing the timeline of each act of generosity, each unseen effort that had maintained this household, and contrasting it with the indifferent reception now. My thoughts circled around the disparity between effort and recognition, the quiet work I had done to support, to sustain, to nurture, often unnoticed, often unappreciated. The tension in the room was subtle but pervasive, and I could feel my own pulse steadying as I recognized that observation itself was a form of power. There was no need to confront yet. Patience would allow clarity, and clarity would dictate the next move. Each inhalation, each exhalation, each careful measurement of the situation served to prepare me for the moment when truth would finally be acknowledged, when the house, the holiday, and the carefully maintained illusion of family harmony would bend under the quiet weight of undeniable evidence. I leaned back in my chair and allowed my gaze to wander over the dining room, taking in the subtle details that had always seemed ordinary until now. The sunlight filtering through the curtain window highlighted the gentle gleam of the polished hardwood floor, and the flicker of the candle flames created shadows that danced across the walls. I thought about the years I had spent preparing for these holidays, the careful planning of menus, the selection of china, the timing of each course, all executed with precision to bring warmth and comfort to my family. Each act, though unseen or unacknowledged, had been a labor of love. Now, in the quiet aftermath of Mark's comment, the contrast was striking. I remembered the mornings spent at the grocery store, selecting the freshest vegetables and the most tender cuts of meat, and the afternoons baking pies, their aromas filling the house with a sense of tradition and celebration. Each memory surfaced like a delicate thread, weaving together a tapestry of devotion that had quietly supported my family for decades. I noticed Jessica rearranging the silverware with meticulous care, a smile on her lips that did not reach her eyes, and I felt a ripple of clarity wash over me. These small gestures, so precise and controlled, spoke volumes about priorities and intention. I recalled every card I had sent, every birthday surprise carefully orchestrated, every effort to maintain harmony even when disagreements arose. In the midst of these reflections, a calm determination began to take hold. The quiet patience that had defined me was not weakness. It was preparation. I could feel the careful plotting of past months crystallize in my mind, each overlooked expense, each subtle slight now illuminated with purpose. I sipped my tea slowly, letting its warmth steady my resolve. The chandelier above cast long, angular shadows across the room, highlighting the contrast between light and dark, between perception and reality. I understood then that observation was a form of power, that seeing clearly, remembering precisely, and acting deliberately could shift the balance without raising a voice. The realization gave me a sense of control I had not felt in years, a quiet anticipation building as I considered how to unfold the evidence that had been waiting silently in plain sight. In that stillness, I recognized the first step toward reclaiming acknowledgement, toward revealing the truth without accusation, letting actions speak where words had failed. The weight of awareness settled firmly, a steady pulse beneath the surface of composed expression guiding each choice in the moments yet to come. I placed the documents and receipts I had gathered over the years onto the kitchen island, letting the sunlight streaming through the window illuminate every detail. Each invoice, each bank statement, each handwritten note was a testament to the careful planning and quiet sacrifices I had made for my family. I observed the faint rise of tension in Mark's shoulders as he glanced at the stack, his smile faltering slightly, and Jessica's eyes darting nervously between her husband and me. The air was thick with the unspoken acknowledgement of what had been overlooked, the realization dawning slowly but unmistakably. I took a measured sip of tea, the warmth grounding me as I set the cup down with deliberate calm, my gaze sweeping the room with quiet authority. Emily and Ethan looked up from their plates, sensing the subtle shift in energy, their expressions curious, uncertain, hesitant. I allowed myself a small, serene smile, the kind that spoke of years of patience, of resilience, of being unseen yet ever present. Memories of past holidays, the hours spent decorating, cooking, organizing, returned in a flowing stream, each act once invisible now revealed in contrast to the unawareness around the table. The chandelier above cast long, warm beams across the countertop, highlighting the edges of paper and envelope, as if spotlighting the evidence that had quietly waited for this moment. I noticed the small gestures of nervous adjustment from Mark and Jessica, the careful placement of silverware, the shifting of plates, the subtle pauses in their conversation, all betraying their unease. I leaned forward slightly, not to confront, not to accuse, but to let the evidence speak louder than any words could. My heart remained steady, the rhythm of my breath controlled, a quiet counterpoint to the growing awareness in the room. The realization settled, a gentle but firm weight. The balance of recognition, long ignored, was beginning to tilt. I had watched silently for decades, nurtured, provided, and prepared. Now the acknowledgement of my contribution could no longer be avoided, and the quiet power of truth hung in the air, palpable, inevitable, and entirely in my hands. The silence lingered for several seconds after I laid the papers across the kitchen island. Nobody reached for them at first. Nobody wanted to be the person who acknowledged what they represented. Then Emily slowly stood from her chair. At 16, she had always been observant, far more than most people realized. She stepped closer and glanced at the top document. Her eyes moved across the page, then toward me. "Grandma, these are payments for our family vacations." Her voice was quiet, but in the stillness of the room it seemed louder than anything else. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Jessica immediately reached for her glass of water. I remained calm. "Yes," I said softly. "That is one of them." Emily picked up another statement. "And this one paid for the lake cabin rental last summer." Ethan looked up from his seat. "The place with the boats?" Emily nodded. The room grew even quieter. I watched the realization begin to spread. Not through anger but through simple facts. Facts have a way of changing a room. They do not shout. They do not argue. They simply exist. The late afternoon sunlight had begun to fade outside the windows, casting the dining room in a softer golden glow. The warmth of the holiday decorations suddenly felt different. Less comforting. More revealing. Jessica finally cleared her throat. "I think there is some misunderstanding here." I turned toward her and offered a small smile. "There is no misunderstanding." My voice remained steady. "Every receipt is dated. Every payment is documented." Mark stared at the stack without touching it. For the first time all day, he seemed unsure of himself. I remembered when he was 10 years old and came home devastated after failing a math test. He had looked at me with the same uncertainty then. Back then I had reassured him. I had stayed up late helping him study. I had solved problems beside him until his confidence returned. Looking at him now, I realized something painful. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten those moments. Or perhaps he had simply stopped seeing them. Emily continued sorting through the papers. Her expression changed. With every page, Grandma paid for Christmas at the lodge 3 years ago. Another page. And the beach house. Another page. And part of our kitchen renovation. Jessica's face tightened. Mark rubbed his forehead. Nobody interrupted Emily because nobody could. The numbers were there. The signatures were there. The dates were there. I folded my hands calmly and waited. There was no satisfaction in humiliating anyone. That had never been my goal. What I wanted was something much simpler. Recognition. Truth. Accountability. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the trees outside, I noticed something else. The confidence that had filled the room earlier was gone. In its place sat uncertainty. And uncertainty has a way of opening doors that pride keeps locked. I watched as Mark and Jessica exchanged a glance that said more than words could convey. A silent admission of surprise mingled with unease. The late afternoon sunlight had waned into the soft, golden tones of early evening, the living room lamps casting a gentle warmth across the polished surfaces and highlighting the intricate patterns of the rug beneath our feet. I could feel the subtle shift in the air. A change so quiet it might have been missed if one were not paying attention. Emily and Ethan continued to sift through the papers, their curiosity tempered by respect, their eyes wide with realization. The weight of the evidence settled over the room like a slow, steady tide, reshaping the dynamics without a single raised voice. I remembered the countless hours spent coordinating every holiday, every family gathering, every small gesture that ensured comfort and joy for all, while my own needs often remained secondary, almost invisible. Now those careful contributions were illuminated in stark contrast, undeniable and precise. Jessica fidgeted with the cuff of her sleeve, her smile strained, while Mark ran a hand through his hair, an unconscious sign of tension. I remained seated, calm, observing the unfolding reactions with quiet satisfaction, knowing that patience had been my greatest ally. I traced the edges of the documents with my fingers, letting the tactile reality reinforce the truth. They contained. The room was still, the only sounds the gentle shuffle of papers and the soft breaths of those around me. I noticed how even the warm lighting seemed to emphasize the contours of the room, the lines between acknowledgement and oversight, between understanding and ignorance. Each statement, each receipt, each note was a subtle revelation, speaking volumes to anyone willing to see. The realization unfolded incrementally, layer by layer, until finally, the atmosphere itself seemed to acknowledge the quiet power of measured clarity. There was no anger, no accusation, only the undeniable presence of truth. I felt a sense of equilibrium settling in, a balance restored not through confrontation but through the gentle insistence of evidence and memory. As the shadows lengthened and the evening light softened, the room shifted imperceptibly. The recognition, long delayed, had arrived, and it was impossible to overlook. In that silent acknowledgement, I found the first real sense of resolution, a quiet victory that needed no celebration beyond the awareness that the weight of truth had finally been recognized and respected. I watched the room transform in subtle ways as the realization settled over everyone. Mark's shoulders slumped slightly, the confident posture he had worn all day giving way to uncertainty. Jessica's eyes darted nervously, a faint sheen of unease reflecting in the soft glow of the chandelier above. The late evening light filtered through the windows, warm and gentle, casting elongated shadows across the hardwood floor, and creating a tapestry of light and dark that seemed to mirror the shifting dynamics of the family. Emily and Ethan quietly moved through the documents again, their fingers tracing numbers and dates, confirming details that had once been invisible. I remained calm, my hands resting lightly on the edge of the kitchen island, the lines of my face softened by the ambient light. I thought about the countless holidays, the Thanksgiving dinners, the Christmas celebrations, each planned with precision and care, each supported financially and emotionally without expectation of recognition. Now those long-forgotten efforts emerged. clearly undeniable in their impact and reach. The room felt charged yet serene, a quiet tension tempered by the slow acknowledgement of truth. I noticed the subtle gestures of realization, Mark's hand brushing against the stack of papers, Jessica's lips pressing together, the slight catch in their breathing. There was no need for confrontation, no need for harsh words. The clarity was enough. I let my gaze move across the faces around me, observing the silent acknowledgement, the gradual shift from avoidance to comprehension. Each second stretched with intention, every pause in conversation reinforcing the weight of evidence. The tea in my hands had cooled, but the warmth of the room, the gentle hum of quiet reflection, and the golden light of early evening combined to create a space where understanding could take root. I allowed a soft, controlled smile to play at the corners of my mouth, not of triumph but of quiet satisfaction. Recognition had arrived, subtle yet complete, and with it, a calm equilibrium that had long been absent. The room no longer carried the tension of accusation or the discomfort of ignorance. Instead, it was filled with an awareness that the contributions, the care, and the unseen support I had provided for decades were finally visible, understood, and appreciated, and that in this quiet revelation, the family's perception of roles, responsibility, and gratitude had shifted irrevocably. I took a deep breath and allowed the calm of the room to settle fully around me. The sun had completely set now, leaving the kitchen bathed in the soft glow of the overhead lights, warm and steady. I watched as Mark and Jessica moved carefully through the remaining documents, their hands hesitating over each one, the reality slowly settling into their expressions. Emily and Ethan had taken seats nearby, quietly observing, their curiosity now tempered by the weight of comprehension. The atmosphere had shifted completely from tension to thoughtful reflection. I could feel the subtle acknowledgement radiating from every corner of the room, a recognition of what had long gone unnoticed and unappreciated. I leaned back slightly, letting my presence be both a comfort and a quiet reminder of enduring patience. Every line of my face, every fold of my hands conveyed composure, experience, and measured authority. The holiday decorations glimmered softly, reflecting in the polished wood surfaces and adding a gentle luminescence that seemed to underscore the room's new understanding. I thought of the years I had devoted to sustaining our family, the hidden work that had allowed celebrations to occur without incident, the emotional labor that had often gone unseen. All of it was now quietly visible through the evidence laid before them. The air felt lighter, yet more profound, as if the unspoken truth had altered the energy of the space itself. Mark looked up finally, meeting my gaze, and I could see comprehension and a touch of humility forming in his expression. Jessica straightened, lips pressed together, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them without a single word spoken. I allowed myself a brief, controlled smile, one of calm satisfaction rather than triumph, knowing that the recognition was authentic because it had arisen naturally, without coercion. The children watched, learning, understanding, and absorbing the balance between patience, contribution, and acknowledgement. The warm light, the polished surfaces, the careful arrangement of family and documents, all merged into a tableau of quiet resolution. I felt a deep sense of contentment, a knowledge that the years of unseen effort had finally been appreciated. The room held a different energy now, a tempered serenity, the subtle, enduring truth recognized by all present. I settled into my chair fully, confident that the quiet power of measured action, observation, and patience had finally reshaped the family's understanding, restoring not just acknowledgement, but an unspoken respect that would endure long beyond this Thanksgiving evening.